Hey guys, in my last video, we took a look at The Private Secretary, a book published in 1944 as a business office training manual. I bought the book because I was looking for vintage signatures. I had just completed a graphology course, which is the study of handwriting, and this book had a signature in the front cover. So while I was researching, a ghost story developed, and since it's spooky season and on the eve of Halloween, I thought I would share this spirit story with you. The first commercial typewriter was introduced to the business office in 1874, and by the mid-1880s it was a common tool in the stenography department. Now this is a calligraph, and it was manufactured by the American Writing Machine Company. It's similar to a typewriter, but it had a double keyboard. The black keys for uppercase letters and the white keys were for lowercase letters. And it was designed for private secretaries to expedite their work and was marketed as the fastest typing machine. A man named Osborne once typed 126 words per minute on the machine to hold the international title in April 1888. Even though the new technology was used in the business office, it quickly became popular with another crowd. In the late 1880s, a New Age movement was popular in America, and spiritualists and mediums alike used this typewriter to talk to the dead. Born in 1831, George Washington Newton Yost was the second son of John DeWitt Yost of Starkey, New York. George worked on his father's farm as a young man and by all accounts had a brilliant mechanical mind. At some point, he left New York and found his way to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he obtained a patent on grain and grass harvesters. And it appears he spent some time in Nashville, where he was awarded a patent to improve the farm plow. At some point, he made his way back to Pennsylvania, married Sophia in Newcastle, and eventually settled in Corry, Pennsylvania, in the upper northwest corner of the state near the New York border. By the age of 24, Yost was well on his way to success. In 1855, he obtained a patent on a cultivator, and a year later, this patent on the Climax mower, and later the harvester in 1858. Shortly before the Civil War, it appears Yost designed a horse collar and improved his cultivator patent and developed a corn planter in April of 1860. And at some point, Yost found himself about 23 miles from home in Titusville in the Pennsylvania oil fields. In 1866, he and his partner James Densmore, then of Meadville, Pennsylvania, registered a patent for a freight car that transported petroleum from the oil fields. Now, all the while young Yost was building his status as an inventor and the father of farm equipment, another man, Andrew Jackson Davis, was busy inventing his spiritual self. Andrew Davis was born in 1826 in Blooming Grove, New York. Davis was clairvoyant and heard voices as a child. The voices told him to move, and in 1838 he convinced his father to relocate the family to Poughkeepsie, New York. And it was in Poughkeepsie that Davis met James Stanley Grimes, a mesmerist. Educated as a lawyer, Grimes began the study of the brain anatomy and physiology in 1832. He also studied the doctrines of phrenology. He experimented with mesmerism, an act similar to hypnosis, and studied sleep habits of his patients. He became a professor and published theories on natural selection, magnetism, magic, and sleep. He was quite popular in New York, and in 1843 Grimes was giving a lecture on mesmerism, and young Andrew Davis was in attendance. At that lecture, Davis volunteered to be hypnotized. From that moment, Davis began his own study of hypnosis and mesmerism, and with the help of a tailor, an herbal doctor, and a reverend, he was able to access altered states of consciousness. While in an altered state, he dictated the principles of nature, her divine revelations, and a voice to mankind that told the story of creation. Davis also claimed that he communicated with the then dead mystic Emanuel Swedenborg. Now, Swedenborg was a philosopher who also communicated with the spirit world, in which he was told there were 3 heavens, 3 hells, and a middle destination. Swedenborg wrote many works on the afterlife, and he recorded his dreams and visions in the book The Secrets of Heaven. Now, after Davis's spiritual meeting with the dead Swedenborg, he devoted his life to spiritualism, and he wrote many works on the subject. And today, Davis is considered the father of spirit communication. Many of his theories are based on the law of attraction or a positive mindset. His spiritual Bible was one of the sources for the book The Secret, which was published in 2006. Now, back in the 1840s, while Davis was having visions in New York City, about 300 miles northwest of him, in Hydesville, New York, 3 sisters were also communicating with the dead. Maggie and Kate Fox were the same age as George Yost, and reportedly communicated with spirits via knockings and rappings while holding seances in their home and in hotel parlors across New York State. And so popular were the girls that Davis invited them to his home in New York City to test out their abilities. Immediately convinced of their talent and their ability to communicate with the spirit world, David used their popularity and their social acceptance to reinforce his preachings. Now, to further build Davis's credibility and raise him to spiritual heights, his theories were also supported by Professor George Bush, the great-great-granduncle of George Walker Bush. In his later years, Bush was a radical biblical scholar at the University of New York, and he publicly supported Andrew Davis and the spiritual movement. In his early years, he was a Presbyterian minister and a Hebrew scholar. He was a published author on the life of Muhammad, and he surprised everyone in 1845 when he denounced his faith and began writing for the Hierophant magazine and accepted the theology of Emanuel Swedenborg. Bush openly praised Davis's spiritual knowledge of ancient geology, archaeology, and the Hebrew language, as Davis had no formal or secondary education. And this support from the university level helped to start a mass movement towards spirituality and the founding of Davis's spiritual church. Shortly after the Civil War, by 1867, there were 11 million spiritualists in the United States and 35,000 reported mediums. Most prominent people, industrialists and businessmen and scholars, believed in spirit voices, as did many abolitionists of the time. Allegedly, President Lincoln attended spiritual churches and received a spiritual message, which led him to proclaim the freedom of 4 million slaves on September 22, 1862. It is surprising that the wealthy still believed in spirit communication when 16 years before, Maggie Fox of the Clairvoyant Fox Sisters actually confessed that the rappings heard during her seances had been a hoax. And even though the news of the hoax spread fast, inventor George Washington Newton Yost was still a firm believer. Close to the age of 40, Yost was a devout spiritualist and went to work on a machine that could talk to the dead. By 1870, Yost and his new partner, Franklin Andrews, had established the Corey Machine Company, which later became the Titusville Novelty Iron Works. His agricultural and oil patents brought him significant wealth, which allowed him plenty of leisure time to focus on other machining skills. Sometime in the 1880s, Yost attended a spiritual seance at the home of his friend, Simon P. Case. Case was a railroad industrialist who lived on 15th and Oxford Street in Philadelphia. Simon was publicly known as a spiritualist, and his home was used as a spiritual church. And reportedly, Case invited President Lincoln to his home for spiritual services. While at the Case home, Yost met a medium who could receive spirit messages and wrote the messages on slate boards. And Yost was convinced the messages had been written by the spirits. And with his success in mechanical engineering, it soon became his passion to create his own machine that would communicate with the spirit world. And that machine was the typewriter. The Yost No. 1 typewriter was manufactured in 1887 and led to the formation of the Yost Writing Machine Company. The typewriter was marketed to lawyers, authors, stenographers, and scholars, and was a business and spiritual success. Now, Yost met a medium named Lizzie Bangs at the Chicago World's Fair. Using his machine, she tapped out messages to Yost from various historical figures. And he was so taken by her ability to communicate with the spirits, he tried to hire her full-time as his personal medium. She refused, so Yost hired Dr. Henry Rogers to be his full-time spiritual consultant. Now, Rogers was also able to communicate with the spirits and record conversations on the Yost typewriter. But as time went by, Rogers was discovered to be a charlatan, and news of his fraudulent mediumship skills was reported in national newspapers. Yost believed until the end, and reportedly, the former distinguished and wealthy George Washington Newton Yost lost most of his money, his status, and his friendships due to his belief in spiritualism. He died in September 1895 with only his wife and 2 children to attend his funeral. The National Spiritual Association of Churches is headquartered in Lilydale, New York. The United States Spiritist Federation holds the belief in Davis' principle that spirits communicate while one is in the body and the other is in higher spheres. However, spiritualism and the Davis Law of Attraction make up less than 3% of the reported religions in the United States today, even though there have been over 35 million copies of the book The Secret sold.